So Ohio voted against a change to their constitution that seemed to be about voting, but really was all about abortion. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So after the U.S. Supreme Court made it legal for states to ban abortion, Ohio moved aggressively to do just that, with its Republican legislature and Republican governor passing one of the strictest anti-abortion laws in the country, banning abortion after just 6 weeks. Many women don't even know if they're pregnant at 6 weeks. So this move was seen as effectively a ban on all abortions in the state. You have to remember, earlier this year, there was the 10-year-old girl who was raped, who couldn't get an abortion in Ohio and had to go get an abortion from a brave physician, Dr. Caitlin Bernard, in Indiana. Dr. Bernard was disciplined, but in Ohio, she might have actually faced jail time. Well, the actions of the Ohio legislature so outraged people that on the one hand, you've got litigation that's winding its way to the Ohio Supreme Court, essentially arguing that this ban violates the state constitution. But that's a tough case to make because nowhere in the state constitution is abortion enshrined as a right. So that led to the other track, where you had a group of people concerned about this legislation who canvassed the state and gathered enough signatures to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot this November. They gathered far more than enough signatures to be able to put a ballot question before the voters that would guarantee Ohioans the right to an abortion. As it turns out, though, there's more than one way for a constitutional amendment to end up on the ballot in front of the voters. And one way is through the legislature. So after the legislature engaged in all kinds of political games to try to stop this question from getting on the ballot, the final legal maneuver that they tried was to put a ballot question before the voters in August, this last Tuesday, that would have changed the threshold for something to pass and become a constitutional amendment from 50% of the vote up to 60% of the vote. Now, this action by the Republicans in the legislature fooled nobody. Everybody knew what was really going on here. They weren't just concerned about people amending the Constitution. They were trying to stop the voters of Ohio from protecting their right to an abortion. After all, one of the great ironies of this situation is that this ballot question was put on the ballot in August for the simple purpose that August tends to be a low turnout election. And the Ohio legislature was banking on the fact that only anti-abortion forces would show up to vote. And in this case, they would have only needed 50% of the vote to change the Constitution so that the pro-choice amendment in November would require 60% of the vote. Well, the voters of Ohio sure surprised the legislators because they turned out to vote in big time. 2.8 million votes were cast. That's almost double the 1.66 million votes that were cast last year in the state's primary elections, where you had races for governor, the U.S. Senate, and the U.S. House up for grabs. And that vote defeated the amendment handily, 56.5% to 43.5%, losing by 13 percentage points. Now, a lot of the people who voted against this simply because they were outraged about the underhanded behavior of the state legislature. That might have pushed some of the undecideds into the no category. But more than anything, this issue was driven by abortion, and everybody knew it. This was a slick and underhanded way to defeat the pro-choice amendment before the voters could even get to it. And when you look at the source of the $32.5 million that was spent on this campaign, you know everybody knew that this was not just some local issue over how many votes it would take to change the Constitution. 8 out of $10 spent on this race came from outside Ohio. And $4 million came from a single donor, Richard Uihlein from Illinois, who again gave $4 million to the anti-choice forces. And he's not the only one who is giving that kind of money to the bad guys. Leonard Leo, the Federalist Society leader who helped engineer the right-wing Supreme Court that we've got now, gave millions to the anti-choice side, as did Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America from Washington, D.C. They knew what the stakes were, and apparently the people of Ohio did too, and they saw right through the BS. This just shows how two issues that started to get attention in the last congressional elections continue to be powerful issues for the Democrats and against the Republicans. On the one hand, people aren't so keen on the Republican efforts to undermine democracy. This is a perfect example and a simple extension of the kind of behavior that Donald Trump and his corrupt lackeys have engaged in. Secondly, people across the country are outraged by the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, and they are taking out their anger on elected officials trying to implement the draconian agenda that the Supreme Court has been pushing. Well, if you want to see another video where I talk about how abortion has become the seminal issue in America today, check out this video over here. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.